we joined by John Hinderaker?
Yes, sir.
John is the president of the Center of the American Experiment. And John, I read the piece to the listeners in the event. They hadn't seen it in today's Star Tribune, but you guys had an event scheduled at the Rochester Golf and Country Club, and you had to cancel it.
Joe, it's an amazing story. First of all, just to back up for a moment, we're putting on a series of events on criminal justice and law enforcement around the state. And we did one last night in Coon Rapids, for example. Mm-hmm. And when we set these up, we team up our policy fellow, Jeff Van Nest, who's a 20-year veteran of the FBI, just retired from the FBI, along with the local chief of police and the sheriff of the local county.
Right.
And they have kind of a panel discussion. They talk about law enforcement issues in that community. So on March 15, we had two of these events on the calendar. There was a lunch event in Rochester, and that was scheduled at the Rochester Golf and Country Club.
Right.
And then there was a 5 o'clock p.m. event down the highway in Owatonna. Mm-hmm. And so these events are going along, and by the way, the Rochester Golf and Country Club is a very familiar venue for us. We had 3 events there in 2021.
Really?
So, yeah. So they know us well. Our people know them. It's been an excellent relationship. They're a fine venue. So as of the Friday before these events, which are going to be on a Tuesday, our staff is going back and forth with the country club staff, making the final plans and preparations for the lunch event, which was going to feature the Rochester chief of police and the sheriff of Olmsted County, along with our policy fellow.
Right.
And on Sunday afternoon, a little after 4 o'clock on Sunday afternoon, the general manager of the country club called Micah Olson, who is our Greater Minnesota coordinator, and told him they were canceling the event. And Micah, of course, is just stunned. Sunday afternoon, the event's supposed to start at 11 o'clock on Tuesday. So Micah called me and said, what are we going to do? There obviously wasn't time to try to get a new venue for a Tuesday event on Sunday afternoon. So I called the general manager of the country club on first thing Monday morning, and I said I'd gotten this message from Micah, and I expressed some amazement because we had a signed written contract with the country club. And the general manager acknowledged that, yes, you do. You do have a signed contract. and the contract had a very standard, what we lawyers call a force majeure clause.
Right.
In other words, in case of war, riot, or act of God, all bets are off, and the contract is canceled. But of course, there hadn't been an act of God or war or anything of the sort.
It's the Olmsted County Sheriff.
Joe, can you believe this?
No.
I still can't believe it. Their own chief of police of their own city and the sheriff of their own county, and they go out of their way to insult them. So that's exactly what I said to the general manager. I said, are you crazy? Why would you do this? And he said, well, somebody complained to some people on our board, and the board took a vote and decided to cancel the event. And I said, well, why don't you should get on the phone, because I said, we'll sue you. We got a contract. I mean,
right.
we're in a hole here. We can't reschedule this event for a different venue in the next 24 hours. So he said he would call some board members and see what he could do. That's where we left it. Well, the next day, of course, is Monday. And the event is starting at 11 o'clock Tuesday morning. We wait until about lunchtime on Monday, and I don't hear anything back saying that they've changed their minds, they've seen the light. And so we go to the Upper Midwest Law Center, which is, as you know, a great C3 organization that we've worked together with a number of times. And I said, I think we're going to have to sue these people and ask the court for a temporary restraining order requiring them to proceed with our event. Mm-hmm. So they put together a complaint and a motion for a TRO and an affidavit that I signed, and they filed that stuff. And it was toward the end of the day on Monday when they got it all filed. And here again, our team is leaving for Rochester at like 9 o'clock Tuesday morning, not knowing if there's going to be an event or not. We were not able to get in front of the judge in time to try to get an order.
But you did go down there anticipating that you were going to be able to have the event?
Well, we hoped so.
Yeah.
We hoped so. We didn't know.
Did you get in the building?
No, the building was locked up tight.
Wow.
Joe, you can't make this stuff up.
No.
It's unbelievable. Building is locked up tight. Apparently nobody there. There were several country club members who, our audience was showing up in the parking lot.
Right.
And the chief of police and the sheriff, they showed up, and everybody's milling around in the parking lot. There are 2 local TV stations who've sent camera crews. They've got wind of it somehow. And so our communications director holds kind of an impromptu press conference in the parking lot there. There are several club members who were going to attend the event, and they were irate because they couldn't get into their own club. They were locked out.
Well, let me see if you can break this down. A woman who was a member, apparently, named Erin Nystrom, began a petition. What do you understand what it was she was found distasteful? Oh, there's 3 words. Did she find a discussion of crime, public safety distasteful, or the fact that the center of the American experiment tends to have conservative ideas?
Well, it's hard to tell because I actually she did a petition on change.org, right? And if you look at the petition, it's all about education, and it's all about the CRT tour that we did last year, anti-critical race theory tour that we did last year, where, by the way, we held our Rochester event at the Rochester Golf and Country Club. It's unbelievable. And so somehow, it's a classic example of people who just, I don't know what they're thinking, but the board of directors of this country club apparently just decided to knuckle under to this little handful of militants, who were urging them to cancel our event.
Do you routinely encounter this kind of opposition to your existence?
No, we really don't. When we did our CRT tour, we had issues in a couple of cities. We had issues in Duluth. We had protesters show up. Typically, if we went to a college town, a few protesters would show up, and they were mostly college professors. So that happened in Moorhead and Marshall.
All right.
But no, we don't have that. We're not used to having people breach contracts with us, that's for sure.
Well, this Nystrom intimated she's referencing it being not analogous. She's referencing the fact that protesters showed up to a CRT event you had in Duluth. And she's intimating that your event on crime and public safety featuring the county sheriff and the police chief would have resulted in protesters. I don't know why anyone would have protested.
Well, if there was a protester, it would have been her.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, the only person who was out there stirring up opposition to our event was Ms. Nystrom herself. I don't know that she said that she was going to show up and protest, and frankly, I wouldn't care if she did.
No.
It was a very high-level, sophisticated discussion of law enforcement in Olmsted County, and in particular, the panel was going to talk about some of the things that they're doing well in Rochester that some other cities in Minnesota could learn from. But you should know, Joe, that we sued the country club for breach of contract. We couldn't get a temporary restraining order in time, but that lawsuit is proceeding as one for damages. We've got damages from having to reschedule the event. It's now on at a different venue for April 26th. We've also sued Ms. Nystrom for tortious interference with contract. So she's now a defendant in that lawsuit as well.
Do you believe this? Nystrom and her husband own a Rochester restaurant, and she said her business and her family have been repeatedly attacked on social media by CAE supporters. What? I don't believe that. I don't believe that.
Well, I don't believe it either. I don't know where we've mentioned her name. I don't know. I have no knowledge of it, and I'm skeptical of it. The other thing that happened, Joe, that we haven't mentioned, this whole story is just beyond belief. The Rochester Post-Bulletin ran a story on that Monday, or maybe it appeared Tuesday, the day before or the day of the event, but it was written pre-event. And then they wrote a follow-up story about the fact that the event was canceled by the country club. And in these stories, they made these absurd allegations. They said that Jeff Van Nest, our FBI veteran policy fellow, was, quote, attached to, close quote, a kind of bizarre QAnon conspiracy theory, which was just made up by the reporter. I mean, completely from outer space. Jeff looked at that. It's like, what? and the word fringe was in there, and right wing was in there, and they quoted I think the head of the local DFL party, and it's just ridiculous. And so Jeff also retained the Upper Midwest Law Center, and they contacted the editor of the Rochester Post-Bulletin and said, "Look, this is false and it's defamatory, and Jeff is going to sue you.
Mm-hmm.
He will. He's going to sue you for libel." And we think we've got you dead to rights on actual malice, which is the threshold for presumed and punitive damages. And so the Rochester Post-Bulletin took the, I think, almost unprecedented step of printing a retraction on the front page.
Really?
Of the newspaper. Yeah.
Really?
Is that a ray of hope?
Yeah,
kind of.
it is a ray of hope.
Wow.
I commend them for it. I commend the editor. Now, the articles never should have appeared in the first place. The one written before the event, I think it was the first article this cub reporter ever wrote for the paper, by the way.
Oh.
But the retraction says the Post-Bulletin regrets this inaccuracy and these portrayals and unconditionally retracts them in full. And it says, to the extent this subheading in this quote could be interpreted as suggesting that CAE holds policy views out of the mainstream, or that the CAE event was in any way comparable to that racist organization's meetings. That's the KKK, by the way.
Right. What's the
those interpretations are unequivocally false.
what is the larger dynamic at work here? This is a piece of a puzzle that we're seeing, and it's no one's accepting of each other. This is a terribly benign event you were going to have in terms of your guests, and I still can't figure out. I doubt she'd talk to us, but I still can't figure out unless it's just a hatred of conservatism.
Well, I think that's what it is. I think we're seeing two things at work here. One is we've got these just fanatical leftists who are crazed in their hate for America, their hate for what we all grew up, believing was normal and good, and their hate for conservatives who now basically represent America and what we all think is normal and right. And there's this minority out there, and they are a rather small minority that just hates all of those things, and they hate us with a passion. And even though they're such a small minority, they're very loud, they're very noisy, they're very demanding. And I think the second thing we're seeing here is the tendency of many businesses, to just knuckle under to these noisy radicals. Joe, I can't put myself in the place of these board members of this country club and try to answer the question, what were they thinking? In what world did this make sense? And now they're facing a lawsuit. They're paying lawyers. We're coming after them for damages. It's ridiculous.
You and I are about the same age. How did you survive Dartmouth and Harvard?
Well,
back then it was not a failed academy, was it?
It was not a failed academy. I was actually kind of a commie for much of the time that I was in college. Nobody cared. Here's the difference, Joe. I had friends who were members of the college Republicans. I had friends who were liberals. I had friends who were commies. But, it never occurred to people at that time that you should hate the people who disagree with you politically.
Right.
And in fact, we typically changed our minds about every 6 months anyway.
Right, exactly. You see where Yale now is trying to prevent Pence from speaking on campus?
Yeah, former Vice President of the United States. Yeah. It's this very strange world we live in where this little noisy minority repeatedly gets its way. And of course, the academy is a little different. The colleges and universities are so far gone.
They're gone.
It's unbelievable.
They're gone. Well, this was very interesting. You've got a good sense of humor about it, and the lawsuit against the club is continuing. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Well,
and John, just so you know, this is the longest ad we've ever done on the GL podcast.
Well, I appreciate it, guys. I thank you for it. AmericanExperiment.org.
Nice.
And everybody attend our Give It Back rally, 11 o'clock in the morning at the state capitol on April 23rd.
oh, that's
Give
a
that
great
surplus back.
reminder. That's what, your third or fourth tax rally? I think it's your fourth. You had one, in the early 90s, I think?
Well, I think Jason Lewis was. In fact, Jason's going to appear and speak at our rally here. I think if you go back in the day, I think the Taxpayers League and Jason Lewis and people like that organized some major tax rallies, and then they kind of died out.
Yeah.
And so we are trying to revive that tradition and get some real pressure on the legislature to give the taxpayers back the surplus in the form of permanent tax cuts.
One more thing. I forgot to mention it, but I want your reaction to it. And it's, again, regarding Erin Nystrom. Nystrom and her husband own a Rochester restaurant, and she said her business and her family have been repeatedly attacked on social media by CAA supporters, and you and I agree that we find that not plausible. And then her final quote is, yeah, we started the petition, she said, but now I presume she means your group, they're using this as a jumping off point for something that is horrible and toxic. What in God's name is horrible and toxic?
About public safety.
I don't know. I have no idea. Is she talking about the chief of police? Is she talking about, public safety?
What's horrible and toxic is crime.
Yeah, crime is horrible and toxic. And I'm not a big fan of tortious interference with contract either, which is what we sued her for.
Right. John, thank you. We'll be in touch.
Hey, thank you, Joe.
All
Bye-bye.
right. John Hinderaker, president of the Center of the American Experiment.